I told you, time isn't what you think.
Less than a year ago, the name Jonathan Majors was followed by talk of critical and box office success, skyrocketing fame, even Oscar buzz.
I'm coming for everything.
But this morning, a different conversation surrounds that marquee name.
Something about sitting here right now and looking at you and understanding the gravity of the situation. A situation that I, in many ways, put myself in.
The actor spoke exclusively with ABC News for the first time after being convicted in late December for harassment and misdemeanor reckless assault in the third degree, which could carry a penalty of up to a year behind bars.
Hey guys, what's going on? So the Jonathan Majors did an interview about, after the trial and what's going on after the trial. And I thought it was fascinating because I honestly think he shouldn't have been convicted of the crimes that he was convicted of. I think, unfortunately, his legal team did a poor job of evaluating the evidence and then going and saying, well, this is the best strategy moving forward, because I think he had an automatic win if he allowed them to argue what made sense in this trial. So before we get into it, Jonathan Majors was convicted of reckless assault, meaning that what he was doing was just so reckless that he didn't mean to injure her, but he injured her. But he was also convicted of the violation of harassment, which is essentially a parking ticket here in New York. If you're in New York, it's a parking ticket. It's nothing, a violation of harassment. It's not a criminal offense. He was acquitted on 2 counts of intentional assault, meaning that he intended to harm her. So he was acquitted of that. And then he was also acquitted of aggravated harassment, where he was intentionally trying to harass her, and in that conduct, he injured her. Now, I think he has really good grounds of appeal. The verdict is inconsistent. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But based off of what you're going to hear, you'll see what I'm talking about when I think his legal team is the one that kind of dropped the ball. Okay, so before we get into the interview, I need to explain to you justification in New York State. Now, justification is in Article 35 of the New York Penal Law. Now, what it says is that if someone takes your property, you can then use physical force to get your property back. And if that person's injured, you're justified in injuring that person. Now, obviously, it's within reason, but you have to raise that as a defense. You have to say, yes, I injured that person trying to retrieve my property, and I was justified in doing so. And the reason being they're trying to take my property. Let's look at the law together. Okay, so this is the penal law of New York State. And we're going to go down. Now, this is Article 35, and this is about justification. In other words, when you're allowed to use physical force in situations, and it would be lawful. Now, one of the legal things that you have to understand about the use of this as a defense is that you have to essentially admit to the underlying conduct. Let me give you an example. If you're saying that you killed someone based on self-defense, or you were justified in killing him, you can't then go and argue, I didn't kill the person, right? It's either you say, I didn't kill the person, then the state has to prove you killed them. Or you can argue, well, I killed them, but I was justified in doing it. That's the justification defense. So in the Jonathan Majors case, he had 2 options. He could argue, I didn't harm her, which that's what he argued, and lost. Or he could have argued, I harmed her, but I had a defense, a legally recognized defense that justified that harm. So now let's go through the justification defense. So we're going down to 35.25. I should have just clicked it instead of just scrolling down. But anyway, here it is, 35.25. This is what the law allows. So he would have been able to use this. Justification. Use of physical force to prevent or to terminate a larceny or criminal mischief. Now, a larceny is a theft. That's what we call it in New York. A person may use physical force other than deadly physical force, so you can't kill the person, upon another person when, to the extent that he or she reasonably believes such to be necessary to prevent or terminate what he or she reasonably believes to be the commission or attempted commission by such other person of a larceny or of criminal mischief with respect to property other than premises. So what does that mean? That means if someone steals your phone, right, takes your phone from your hand, you can use force to get that thing back. Now, if you use force to grab your phone back and that person is injured, in a reasonable way, you pull the phone back and they fall, and they break their arm. Police come and they try to arrest you for assault. They prosecute you, say, well, I was justified because the person just stole my phone. I retrieved my property. They got injured when I tried to retrieve my property. Now, obviously, it's got to be reasonable amount of force. That's why they say you can't use deadly force, because some people will probably take this to the next level. But the force has to be reasonable, right? You can't just stomp the person out because, if you got your property back, things of that nature. So you always have to think about the element of reasonableness. But here, if the person takes something from you, attempts or even completes it, they do it, they take it from you, you then take it back and you use force to get it back, you're covered under New York law. But the key here is you have to admit to the underlying conduct. I injured that person. That person, yes, I took my phone back and that person broke their arm. But I was justified. And you can't say I didn't do it, because if you say I didn't do it, then there's no justification. You don't need a justification defense because you said you didn't do it. That's the problem with so Majors had those two options. I did it, but justified, or I didn't do it. And he went with the I didn't do it. That's where I think the conviction happened. So now you understand justification or defense of property in New York State. So now let's listen to the interview and see if Jonathan Majors' legal team played it right. Listen to what happened.
Afraid. And I'm standing there, and the verdict comes down. I say, how is that possible? Based off the evidence, based off the prosecution's evidence, let alone our evidence. How is that possible?
But after only hours of deliberation, a jury of his peers agreed with prosecutors that he did physically injure his then-girlfriend Grace Jabbari in an incident last March.
What happened exactly, do you know?
No, I don't know. But she's unconscious.
That 911 call from Majors came hours after an argument broke out with Jabbari in the back seat of an SUV, when Majors received a text from another woman saying, "Oh, how I wish to be kissing you." Jabbari testified that when she grabbed the phone, Majors tried to get it back, fracturing her finger and giving her a cut behind her ear. She says inside the car, you hit her in the face,
Yeah.
twist her arm behind her back, fracture her middle finger.
Yeah, that did not happen.
How did those injuries come about?
I wish to God I knew.
So now you see the facts, right? Fighting in the car, she takes the phone, he tries to take it back, it's an argument, there's a little struggle, she's injured, and now we're in court. Now, if you were his attorney, there's two ways you can go with this. You can only go one way. You can't go the, I did it, but was justified, and I didn't do it, right? It's either one. Either you got to cop to it and say, I harmed her, but I had a good reason, or I didn't harm her. So he went with the, I didn't harm her. Now, given those facts, that doesn't seem reasonable. You're in the back, you're struggling. She sees something of infidelity. She snatches your phone, you're snatching it back. You guys are tussling back there. I think a reasonable jury can say she was injured. But now moving forward to the next phase. Let's say now your argument wasn't, she wasn't harmed, but no. Yes, during that struggle for my phone back, for my property that she took, the attempted larceny, I took back my property. And in that process, injured her. But the law tells me, Article 35, Section 35.25 says, I can use physical force to take back my property when someone's just taking it, right? And that's exactly what happened here. And the facts lay out with that perfectly, right? Took his phone, tried to get it back, she's injured, he's not guilty. He was justified. Now, there may have been some thought process that may have been bad for the career, but I would have taken that rather than a conviction. So what he, and I think his legal team tried to do, was demonize the victim. She's a bad person, this. Look, I was running from her. All that stuff after what happened in the car is irrelevant. Right? A lot of people think he's running. That's irrelevant to the fact of the matter is she was injured in that car when they were struggling over that phone, which is more than reasonable to believe. It's assault. Now, if the jury doesn't have anything else, if you're not saying I did it but was justified, they can't find that this was self-defense. You didn't say that you did it. You're saying you didn't do it.
In a split verdict, Majors was found not guilty of two other misdemeanors, assault with intent to cause physical injury and aggravated assault. They're saying you didn't intend to injure her, but the result of your recklessness injured her.
Right.
Were you reckless?
I was reckless with her heart.
Not with her body.
Not with her body.
The physical altercation started inside an SUV after Majors received a suggestive text message from another woman. Hours later, after Majors placed a 911 call, police found Jabari unconscious on the closet floor in their apartment, as seen in this body camera footage.
See, now this is where I don't think it's his lawyer's fault. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think it's his fault. I think his lawyers are more than smart enough to say, we have an easy win here. Right? We have an easy win. You just got to say, hey, this happened. We fought for the phone. If she got injured, it happened while we were arguing for the phone, because that's the only time that they had this incident. Everything afterwards is essentially irrelevant, right? We struggled in that cab for my phone, and she may have been injured. You cop to that small piece of it and say, yes, but I was trying to retrieve my property. And they can't find him guilty of that, right? He's obviously not guilty, and the law allows you to do that. He's essentially justified in retrieving his property. But now listening to this interview, it's clear that he's the one that said, I didn't harm her, I didn't do this, I didn't do any of that stuff. Right? I'm a good boy and I was a saint and I don't know where she got injured, And you had the evidence where he was trying to see that she wasn't injured when she went to this club. She wasn't injured here. All these times that she wasn't injured. But then yet you still had some of the witnesses during the trial said she complained about her finger being broken. She not her finger being broken, her finger hurting and things of that nature. She did have some complaints during the night. So at that point in time, I think he was thinking career and not the case. Would it have been so bad if they found him not guilty because he was justified in trying to get his phone back? Or is it worse for him to be found guilty of reckless assault? I think, to be fair, not guilty wins the day. But, I'm not $1 million superhero actor who's trying to save his career. I honestly think the client this time killed his own defense, and the reason why he's got a conviction is because he just didn't cop to the underlying conduct. Hey, we struggled, I got my phone back, she was harmed. This interview is new. I watched the whole thing. He's going to say he's going to appeal and a lot of stuff, but I do think he has a viable appeal, because essentially the way the DA charged him, they charged him with harassment and reckless assault, and they found him guilty of the harassment and reckless assault. But then they found him not guilty of aggravated harassment, and aggravated harassment literally is harassment and reckless assault. So it's like they found him guilty of A plus B, A and B, right? The harassment, and B, the assault. But then when they said, okay, so is he guilty of both of them together, the harassment plus the assault, then they said no. So that's a little inconsistent. If he's guilty of both the harassment and the assault, then he's guilty of aggravated harassment, because that's what aggravated harassment is. But I went through that pretty fast, and that may be complicated for some people, but that's essentially what I think his appeal should be, because I think that's viable, right? In the same crime spree, unfortunately, he was both guilty and not guilty of the same criminal conduct in the same way, which doesn't make any sense. But that's for his lawyers to decide what they're going to do. I think, to be fair, if he gets a retrial, my retrial is definitely going to be the justification defense. I injured her, yes, but I was justified. As always, tell me where I'm going to tell comment section. Tell me if you say, hey, Nate, I think your analysis is crap. I think, he was going to be guilty no matter what. I just think, personally, based on the evidence provided in this trial and the way they argued it, didn't give them any other choice. Right? She's like, I got injured when he was wrestling me in a car. You say I was wrestling her in the car. She's injured, but now it's like, is he injured in the car? She's injured. It's unreasonable to believe that she was injured when he was trying to take that phone back. The decision the jury had was the only one I think they could reasonably come to, unless they agree with him. They say, well, I don't believe you injured him. But I just don't, I think that was too much of a risk. But again, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.